Well, hi class. So this week we're starting the informative speech module. So I definitely am going to talk about that in today's recording, but also before we get there, just some comments and some feedback overall about the critic speech. And I thought overall as a class, you all did a really good job. And most of you, and this is what I'm really after with that critic speech assignment, you have a really good understanding now of how to structure and organize a speech. And we're going to continue to build on that structure as we move on to the next speech, to the informative speaking assignment. But a couple things that I want to mention in terms of improving based on what I saw with the critic speech. So one thing I want to make sure that you're all really clear about is always begin your speech with your attention getter. So that means when you hit record, the first words I want to hear out of your mouth are the words of the attention getter. That's the whole point of the attention getter, to grab the attention of the audience and then to lead them into your topic sentence. So don't begin your speech by first telling us your name. Hello, everybody. My name's Joe, and today I'm going to be talking about, all right, let's get started. No, we don't need that information. We know who you are. We see your name right on the top of the video, and you're going to tell us your topic in the speech after you grab our attention. So always begin with the set attention getter. And I think it's important too that you want to have a couple seconds between hitting record and then starting the speech. Some of you hit record and then you're into the speech and kind of cuts off the first few words. So hit record, get set, look into that camera, and then deliver that opening line. And those first words, those opening lines should be your actual attention getter that then leads us into the actual topic. And along with that, end your speech with the last line in the speech. Say it in a way so that it has a nice sense of impact and a strong sense of finality so the audience knows that the speech is over, but then you don't have to add a thank you, especially if you deliver your speech right vocally, the audience will know that you're done. Now, I know we're not getting any feedback because we're actually delivering the speeches in our room by ourselves, but we're still creating that illusion of making an impact on the audience. So the last line I want to hear in your speech is the last line of the speech. I don't need a pause and a thank you. And why are you thanking the audience? You're the one doing all the work. They should thank you with a round of applause. So make sure you always begin with the attention getter and end with the last line in the speech. Also, some of you still need to work on getting your eye contact dialed in. You've got to make sure when you're delivering a speech, you're creating the illusion of looking at the people that you're speaking to. So in order to do that, you've got to look right into the camera. That's your audience. You don't want to have your eyes on the screen. Some of you, you're just reading your speech like this, right? We even see the eyes kind of moving. You can't engage the audience unless you look at them. So get those eyes up on the camera. And really, that's just a matter of practicing your speech enough times so you're familiar enough with the content so that you can look at the camera more than you're looking at your notes on the screen or off to the side wherever you have them. Look, I can't prevent you using notes in this type of speaking when we're doing it all remotely, but I still want you to maintain a high degree of eye contact with the audience because you can't really engage the audience and maintain their attention unless you're looking at them, right? When you have a conversation with someone, right, you're not looking down, right? You're not reading off a note card. You're looking at the individual or the people that you're talking to. So let's create that same illusion when you're speaking, eyes on the camera. And I think a good rule to follow as far as practice, once you have your speech written, you want to read that speech out loud from the outline, right? And you don't have to make it difficult. And I'm not teaching you to memorize. I'm teaching you to overlearn through repetition. Repetition is the key to retention. The more you repeat something, the easier it is for you to remember that information. So once your outline is written, it's set, now just pick up that outline a couple times each day. If you do it 3 times a day, for 5 days in a row, you'll be way more familiar with your speech by the time it comes to record the presentation. You'll be able to have your eyes on the camera a lot more. And if you have a chance to practice your speech in front of somebody else, that's a really good way to really get that eye contact dialed in. Some of you already have this down. Your eye contact is wonderful, but a few of you still need to work on getting your eyes up on the camera. And then along with that, no more speech reading, right? This isn't a class on the introduction to public reading. It's a class about public speaking. And again, I know this is getting redundant, but if you want to be an effective speaker, you've got to look at your audience. So I want to see that. I want to see that improvement in the next speech, right? As we get to the informative speech, whether you're doing an informative or persuasive, you want to make sure eyes are on the camera, have a conversation with the audience. I don't want eyes down. I don't want you reading your speeches. All right? Okay. One last thing on the critic speech, but to focus on that, let's go to the screen. All right, so we're on the modules now, and if you look at the week 8 module for the critic speech, you'll see right here, submit and view critic speeches. This is where you want to submit your critic speech video. So if you didn't submit your speech here and you submitted it under the page, and I think it says critic speech video, and you'll also notice that you can't embed your video on that page. So that's the wrong page. Remember, and I've mentioned this a couple times and I'll probably keep mentioning it. The only assignments, the only work that you're responsible for will be work that's listed under the modules. So if something pops up on your grades, right? You're checking your grades and the assignments pop up and you see critic speech video, right? You first want to make sure that you check and see if that's on the modules. If you don't see an assignment on the modules, you're not responsible for that assignment. So make sure if you did submit your video on the wrong page, you need to go right here under the week 8 critic speech module and submit or resubmit your video for your critic speech right here. Get that done and make sure you embed it. You will be able to embed it to that page, and then I'll go ahead and get it graded. I'm about 3/4 of the way done on grading those critic speeches, and I should have those finished up by tomorrow, hopefully no later than Wednesday. All right, so hopefully that clarifies that for any of you that haven't received a grade back on your critic speech. It could be that you just submitted it to the wrong spot. So please, you want to resubmit your videos right here, submit and view critic speeches. All right, so the next thing we want to focus on would be the module you're starting this week, which is the informative speech module. And notice here, I mean, we're pretty much going to be on this for the next month. And one of the reasons why is one of the key components when it comes to public speaking. If you really want to be a good public speaker, you've got to make sure that you leave yourself enough time between writing the speech and delivering the speech so you can practice your presentation. Again, I've been emphasizing this all semester, but there's no real secret to being an effective public speaker. You just have to put in the practice. It's very similar to any other performance, right? If you're in a play, if you're singing in a band, right? You've got to practice so you're ready to go when it's time to perform. It's the same thing with public speaking. So that's why we spend a lot of time here, because in that 4-week period, you're both going to write the speech, you're going to put the outline together, and you're going to deliver that speech. I want to make sure that you have plenty of time in between those two assignments to practice your speech. Practice makes perfect when it comes to public speaking. And a lot of you got that comment with your critic speech, right? Your speech was well constructed, it was organized, but you just had to put time into practicing the speech so you're familiar enough with the content so that you can look into the camera more than you're looking at your outline or your notes for the actual speech. So what I want to draw your attention to right now is getting your topic proposal in for the informative speech. So let's go ahead and go there now. All right, and so when you get to the topic proposal, what's real important about this assignment, and it's because I was so impressed with all the topics that you submitted when we had that brainstorming assignment, a lot of you had some really good persuasive topics. And so essentially, you've got 2 more speeches that you're going to do this semester. You'll have a third one that's a little farewell speech, but that's kind of like the introductory video. So really right now, we're heading in to the real important aspect of the class where we're going to learn how to give what I call academic speeches. And academic speeches are just any speeches where we're going to incorporate research and evidence into the actual presentation. And there are really 2 kinds of academic speeches. You can do an informative speech where the focus is more to teach and develop the understanding of the audience on a topic that isn't a problem to be solved and a topic that isn't controversial, right? And so you want to understand how we put that speech together, and we want to make sure that we get the source citations incorporated into the speech. But a second kind of academic speech is also what we call the persuasive speech. And with the persuasive speech, you have 2 different types of persuasive speeches. You have what we call a behavioral persuasive. That's more where you're focusing on a problem to be solved. And we have an attitudinal persuasive where you're focusing more on an issue of controversy and you're trying to convince the audience that your take, your opinion on the issue of controversy is the correct opinion. That's why too, whenever you submit topics, you always want to write them out as a statement or a sentence and not a question, because if you're doing a topic and it's an attitudinal persuasive speech, right? Instead of just saying legalization of drugs, right? You want to write it out as a statement. I'm advocating for the legalization of all drugs, or I am advocating against the legalization of all drugs. So you always want to write it out as a statement, because then that will indicate your overall persuasive intent or your take, your opinion on the particular topic. So I'm complicating this topic proposal for you because I believe in your ability to do it, and I want to make sure that you're speaking about topics that are important to you. So if you want to do 2 persuasive speeches instead of an informative and a persuasive, or if you want to do 2 informative speeches, you can do so with these next 2 speeches coming up. But when you submit your topic proposal under the informative speech, so just think of it more as this will be the first of the 2 academic speeches that you're going to do. When you submit your topic, I also want you to indicate right under it what kind of topic that speech will be. So you want to indicate whether it's going to be an informative speech, a behavioral persuasive, or an attitudinal persuasive speech. And the reason why that's important, that will determine the type of structural format, i.e. the outline format that you will use for your speech. You will use a different outline format if you're doing the informative speech as compared to the behavioral persuasive speech. With the attitudinal persuasive speech, we're going to use the informative speech outline. We just change the main points in the attitudinal persuasive speech so that they are all independent arguments. So each main point actually is an argument that you're explaining and developing as a reason why your take on the issue of controversy is the correct one. And I know that's a little confusing. That's a lot of info to take in. And I've always felt in teaching a class on public speaking, one of the more difficult concepts for students to grasp is understanding the difference between a good informative topic and a good persuasive topic. So before you submit your topics, and because you also have to identify the type of speech you're going to do on that particular topic, make sure that you watch this instructional video right here, because I go into detail and I explain the difference between an informative speech, a behavioral persuasive speech, and an attitudinal persuasive speech. I'm pretty confident that if you watch this instructional video and you pay attention, you're going to have a good set of criteria to follow that you can use when it comes time for you to submit your topic and then to indicate what kind of speech that will be. All right, so just remember, with the informative topic proposals, you can also do a persuasive speech. I just want you to indicate that when you turn in the topic so we can ensure that you have the right and the correct outline format to follow when you start putting that speech together. So that means if you decide to do a persuasive topic, then you also need to jump ahead and take a look at the module on persuasive speaking. Let's go ahead and go there now. All right, so if we go back to the modules, now we just scroll down to the one after the informative speech, and here you have the module on the persuasive speech. So if you decide that for your informative speech, you'd rather do a persuasive speech, then that means that once you identify the topic, whether it's a behavioral persuasive speech or it's an attitudinal persuasive speech, you then want to be able to go here and use the outline format. Let's go ahead and take a look. So if we look, this is the sample outline for the behavioral persuasive speech. And kind of the nice thing about the behavioral persuasive speech, your main points are already assigned. So if your goal in the speech is to convince the audience that they need to take some kind of action to solve a problem, right? You want to make sure that you're using the behavioral persuasive speech sample outline to follow that and use that as the guideline for your speech. And really the only difference in that speech compared to the informative speech is your main points are already assigned. And you would probably come up with these same main points if you're doing a behavioral persuasive speech. You want to make sure that you discuss the effects of the problem. What's the physical evidence that exists right now that tells us something is wrong? So the effects of the problem will be the physical manifestations that a problem exists. And you always want to make sure in the effects that you have a nice combination of statistics and research to show how widespread the problem is, but also because audiences care more about people than they do numbers and facts and statistics, it's always good to also, in this section, to have a story or two, a real world example of someone who has been harmed, who is suffering the effects of the actual problem. Then the second main point, you'll go over the causes of the problem. Why does the problem exist? And then third, most importantly, you then will be asked to present applicable, practical solutions that the audience can apply to solve the particular problem. And if you do the behavioral persuasive speech, you want to make sure that you have a topic that gives you lots of opportunities to present practical solutions. And what I mean by that, since your classmates will be your audience, essentially, what are you advocating that we do? What kind of action should we take to be able to fight against and hopefully solve or at least diminish the effects of the problem? So behavioral persuasive speech, three main points: effects of the problem, causes of the problem, and solutions to the problem. If you go with the attitudinal persuasive speech, you're just going to use the same outline format that you would for an informative speech. The only thing that changes is you'll actually look. In fact, let's take a look at the sample outline right here. So let's go to the attitudinal persuasive speech, sample outline. We're going to click on that. And then here you'll see that the main points are just arguments that support your take on the speech. This was a really good attitudinal persuasive speech I heard in class a few years ago, but it basically was blaming trading on the stock market as one of the reasons why gas prices fluctuate so much. And so to prove that, in the body of the speech, the speaker has three specific arguments to support that take. And so with the attitudinal persuasive speech, you use the same outline as the informative speech, just your main points are arguments rather than just information enhancing our awareness or understanding about a topic if it's an informative speech. All right, so I hope that's clear. I know it's a little bit confusing, but I'm doing this because I want to give you the freedom in the next two big speeches that you have more freedom to pick the topics that you really want to speak about. And I always tell students this, it's easier to defend the truth than a lie. And what I mean by that is the more passionate, the more into the topic you are, the better your overall delivery will be. All right, and then the last thing I want to touch on today, just remember, whether you do an informative or a persuasive speech for this first academic speech assignment, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 4 sources of evidence that you can plug into that speech. You'll have one in the significant step and then at least one in each of your 3 main points. And remember, when you're citing a source, you just need to give us 3 elements of the source: the title of the publication or the name of the website. And remember, we don't want the names of the articles. They're longer. It's harder for you to remember, harder for the audience to remember. So just the title of the publication, the name of the book, the newspaper, the journal, the magazine, or if you're using a source from a website, just give us the name of the website along with the author and the date. And I think that's a good guide to follow when you're trying to determine whether or not to use an internet source. You don't have that problem if you're using published sources that you find on a database, right? All that stuff is going to be published. So you're going to have the title of the publication, you're going to know who the author is, and you're going to know the date. But if you use something from the internet, but you don't know who said it and when it was said, then don't use that source. A few of you have already asked, well, what if I can't find the date for a source? That means don't use it, right? So those are the guidelines. That's a criteria you'll follow to determine what sources to use and sources to stay away from. And also remember this when it comes to the date, recency has potency. What that means is the most recent sources are the most powerful sources. So keep that in mind when you're doing research to plug into your academic speech, whether that's an informative and a persuasive, or you're doing 2 persuasives or 2 informative speeches. All right, well, get to work. You've got a big week. You're going through that informative module, and make sure you read all the stuff, right? It's pretty easy for me to tell when I'm grading things, like who is taking advantage of all of the available information and who's just going to the assignment and trying to figure it out. Use all of the available materials. If you do, that's going to make your chances to be successful even greater. But so far, I'm real happy with this class. We've got some really talented folks. I look to broaden that talent even more as we get to the next upcoming speech. Have a good week, you guys. We'll talk soon.